This section is on factoring trinomials. And factoring trinomials is one of the main topics, well, of factoring, but also of algebra in general. And the AC method is probably the most common method for solving them. If you learned a different method, you could use that, but we're going to be teaching the AC method. So the AC method is a method for factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And what that means is that a is just the number that is being multiplied by your x squared, b is just the number that's being multiplied by your x, and c is just the number that is by itself. So like on the first question here, your a would be 2, your b would be 9, and your c would be 7. So they're just identifying those numbers as A, B, and C. So our goal is to break up the middle term into two terms and then do factor by grouping, which was a technique that we were doing on the last section. And we accomplish this by finding two numbers. Now these two numbers must multiply together to equal AC, and I'll talk about what AC is. And the two numbers must also add together to equal B. Okay, so AC is taking your number that's in front of your x squared and multiplying it by the number or the constant at the end. So A times C, or AC, and that's really where it gets the name for the AC method. And B is just taking this number here. So let's look at number 1. Again, A is 2, C is 7. So AC, if you take 2 times 7, you get 14. B is just the 9. So I'm going to put B here. Now off to the side, again, we need to pick two numbers. These two numbers need to multiply to be AC, or 14, and they need to add to be B, or 9. So I'm going to start by, well, these ones are already done for us, but when we go on, we're going to have to list out the pairs of numbers ourselves. But on these first questions, they're given for us. So we're listing out all the pairs of numbers that multiply together to give you 14. And so that's like 1 times 14, 2 times 7, negative 1 times negative 14, negative 2 times negative 7. But only one of these pairs will add up to be B, or add up to be 9. And that is this pair right here. So 2 times 7, those are the only two numbers that multiply together to give you 14, but add together to give you 9. So those are the numbers that I'm going to use. And that's when I'm going to break up this 9x. So instead of writing 9x, I'm going to call this 2x, or plus 2x, plus 7x. So I'm splitting up my middle term into two terms. I haven't changed the value at all, because you could always recombine 2x and 7x to get back to 9x. But I've changed this into a four-term question, and I've done that because I can now factor by grouping. So out of these first two terms, you can factor out a 2x, which will leave you with an x plus 1. And then out of the second two terms, you can factor out a 7, which will leave you with an x plus 1. And then to complete the factor by grouping, whatever's in parentheses becomes one of your factors. Whatever's outside the parentheses combines to become your second factor. And that would be your answer. Now if you wanted to check your work, you could. You don't have to. But if you wanted to check, you could FOIL this. So if I were to FOIL this, I would get 2x squared plus 7x plus 2x plus 7. And I do get 2x squared plus 9x plus 7. So you can always check by foiling your answer, and you should get back to the original. Okay, let's look at number 2. So my AC, when you multiply 5 times negative 14, you get negative 70. And then B is 33. So they already have the pairs of numbers listed out here. Again, in the future, we're going to have to come up with those numbers ourselves. So these are all the pairs of numbers that multiply together to give you negative 70. But only one of those pairs of numbers add to give you positive 33. And that would be negative 2 and 35. Those are the only two numbers that multiply, or whole numbers, that multiply to give you negative 70, but add to give you positive 33. So that tells me that I want to have a negative 2y and a positive 35y. So those numbers tell me how I want to break up that middle term. And then I can factor by grouping. So if you take out a y out of the first two, that leaves you with a 5y minus 2. And then out of the second two, I can take out a 7, and that leaves me with a 5y minus 2. So to complete the factor by grouping, whatever is in parentheses becomes your first factor, and whatever is outside parentheses combines to be your second factor. And that would be your answer. If you wanted to check, you could FOIL it. I'm not going to show that here, but if you FOIL it, you would get back to the original question.